This week on the BackTable podcast.
Everyone feels a little bit disoriented from the pace of acceleration of the capabilities and things. And so that hopefully is a reassuring message as well. Like, it's not too late. It's not like this thing is going to just come and it's going to happen to you. I think it's going to be a thing where we get to decide together how these tools will be used in healthcare. It's much more of an empowering message than maybe any technology that's come before. I always felt we had to make a lot of decisions on behalf of the end user when we developed AI over the last 8 or 9 years. And now we can also provide tools and capabilities that make it incredibly easy to start doing these things on your own. So I think that ultimately will be the message of hopefully of empowerment and optimism as people are sort of seeing these things roll out in their lives.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BackTable podcast, your source for all things interventional and endovascular. You can find all previous episodes of our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and on BackTable.com. We've got a great episode lined up discussing AI applications in healthcare with special guest Dr. Matthew Lungren. Artificial intelligence has transformed industries around the world. Most of us are familiar with ChatGPT at this point. We all realize AI has the potential to radically alter the field of healthcare. I got to see Matt speak recently at Western Angio on this topic, but it was cut down to about 10 to 15 minutes that you had to speak?
Yeah, all of the newest developments in 10 minutes.
Right. Yeah, that's what drives me crazy about conferences. So hopefully we'll get to elaborate on what you talked about. I do have some questions from the audience, some of which were at the conference, like Sabine Don. We previously discussed these topics with Anthony Chang, Tamir Wolf, Eric Eskioglu, who's been on the show to talk about AI in the past, all very much at the superficial level, kind of a 101, how docs can get started. I hope to take a little bit of a deeper dive, but also define some terms with you today, Matt. So very pleased to introduce our guest, an expert on large language models and the Chief Data Science Officer at Microsoft HLS. He's going to teach us a bit about the current state of AI in healthcare, a 101 on some of the terminology, and most importantly, a bit on what we docs need to know how to survive and thrive going forward. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thanks so much for having me, Aaron.
Yeah. So Matt, you're by training a pediatric IR, correct?
Yeah, and I do still practice, but yeah, I'm a pediatric diagnostic and IR. I was one of those tortured souls that did additional fellowships, but I really enjoyed it, and it was a wonderful niche to work in now. Yeah.
So just to back up, I mean, you still practice a little bit, but how long were you doing that? And then, I know you were heavily involved with research in AI. Tell us a little bit about that journey to where you are today.
Yeah, I guess I'll try to start as far back as I can remember at this point. But yeah, I did train in radiology and then adult IR at Duke. Really enjoyed that. And then I did a year of pediatric diagnostic / interventional at Cincinnati Children's, and really was kind of torn between private practice and academics. I liked research. I did some in residency and I liked that exploration aspect of it. But I think, at the time I have 3 kids. It's a difficult decision to move everybody for an academic job versus kind of going back to my hometown and doing private practice. So someone named Sam Gambier, I don't, hopefully the audience is familiar with who that is. He was a phenomenal individual, the chair of Stanford Radiology at the time, basically reached out, and I don't think I've met a more inspiring leader in my life. He made me feel like I could run through a brick wall. He's like, I'm going to come out here. We're going to make sure that you're successful academically. We're going to put you on the academic track. And he believed in me. And I'm not sure I believed in myself, to be honest. It's very intimidating, right? To come to a place like Stanford and then try to make your way in the world, particularly with all the grants and all the pressures that come with that. But I did that. We started a PEDS IR program, the first one out here with a partner of mine, Glenn Seidel, who is obviously, for those in the audience who know PEDS IR, would know his name. And so for about 8 or 9 years, I was about 75% to half clinical. And then on the side, which eventually, as you get funding and, you get some success, my lab started to grow and grow and it sort of turned into a pretty large enterprise, actually. We spun it out into a center at Stanford, which was kind of a bridge between the medical school and the computer science department. Really kind of caught the wave of the AI boom just right at the right time. I joined right around the time, if you're familiar with ImageNet or know any of the early CNN work, a lot of it, of course, came from Fei-Fei Li at Stanford and folks like Andrew Ng and others. It was one of those things where I walked over to the Gates building one day, pretty early, maybe after about 6 months of being a faculty, and I'm like, I've got all this data. I'm really into public health. I see that you're spending a lot of time with computer vision now, and it looks like you're great at telling the difference between dogs and cats, and that's awesome. But there's this thing in medicine that we really think is important. It's called radiology, right? And so that kind of just kicked it off. And from there on, I think I was hooked. It was really kind of where it took my career. And like I said, grew into a huge program and eventually found my way into industry.
Yeah. And you mentioned you were at Amazon before and now before Microsoft, right?
Yeah, I did. I started there. And I think part of it was just the timing of things. And the other part of it was AWS, if you're familiar with kind of the cloud world, we always say things like cloud, but no one ever really seemed to know what it actually means. And I was one of those people. But Amazon is a tremendous organization. I feel like when I joined, coming from very much a clinical AI point of view, they kind of have several things that I think they do. Well, one of them is they put you through literal education onboarding. In other words, I, as a relatively senior person, still had to go through the basic cloud training and certification, things that you wouldn't necessarily expect someone coming as kind of a subject matter expert to do. And I think about that all the time because having to like go back and feel like I'm using flashcards even, right? To study for these tests. And then going through that exercise and really committing some of the principles and concepts to memory has been enormously helpful because I often find that some of the most interesting opportunities happen at the intersection of disciplines, right? So for example, AI in healthcare, or in this case, cloud technology in healthcare. And then you kind of bring them together. And in the middle of that Venn diagram between AI, cloud, and healthcare, there's some really powerful things that we're starting to see the result of now happening.
Okay, yeah, and let's kind of dive into that as well. Before we do, for those who are listening now who probably didn't catch your talk at Western Angio, may not have caught any of our prior episodes on AI, can you just cover some basic definitions? Like, obviously, there's AI, what is deep learning versus machine learning? And then your specialty, which is large language models, and then maybe swarm intelligence, some of the basics, the way you kind of start your talks out.
Yeah, I think it ends up being it's like an alphabet soup, right? Every discipline has its own terms and things, and they do have meaning. I think part of the meaning depends on the listener or the audience. But I think for the purposes of this, I'd say AI is I would look at it as the broad, almost waste bucket category, really all encompassing. And it's used so often that I would dare to say maybe it's lost some meaning, right, in terms of its precision of what it actually means. But in general, I think, people would agree, at least with this, that if I had to define it, it's enabling computers to perform tasks that would normally require human intelligence, right? So natural language, recognizing patterns, learning from experience, making decisions. And then if you think of that as like the big broad bucket category, and again, we throw this around a lot, but then you can kind of go a level deeper. And then that's kind of where you get to this machine learning space. And as an aside, that's one of the reasons we actually named the course that we teach at Stanford on this and on Coursera, machine learning, fundamentals of machine learning. They're not AI, even though we tend to slip back into our patterns of just using AI to just mean kind of everything. But machine learning specifically is where computers can learn from data without being explicitly programmed. And that's important. It's basically, you don't have to write the steps or the functions themselves, right? The data and the end results are kind of given to a model, and it can learn the function from the data and the result, and it infers those patterns. Then you can go a level deeper, as you mentioned, deep learning, which is just kind of maybe more specifically artificial neural networks, right? So again, neural networks can be one layer technically, right? They don't have to necessarily, but deep learning really typically implies there are many layers to this. It's incredibly complex. And that's how you kind of get into this space of, I don't really understand. It's a black box, right? I don't understand exactly how it's making decisions. And there's a whole obvious field of research that looks into understanding how deep learning does make some of the predictions and decisions it makes. And you mentioned large language models, and I appreciate the thought that I might be an expert, but at this point, it's such a rapidly moving field. I think I'm, like everyone else, continuing to try to keep up with the developments, and they become very surprising. When I was at Stanford, I think we knew about generative AI, but we typically thought of it as around something called generative adversarial networks, which sort of were used mainly at the time to create images. And we didn't spend a lot of time, at least in my lab, leveraging those. But as you kind of combined the idea of the transformer at scale, I think everyone in the field was surprised to see what kind of came from that scale. And that's kind of what we're experiencing today in large language models. The idea of the transformer, right, goes all the way back to 2017, right? So it was essentially a creative approach to advancing the natural language processing space a little bit further down the line. We were using all kinds of different types of long, short-term memory and RNNs and all kinds of different things. But ultimately, the transformer became incredibly powerful at scale. And that's kind of what we've all been experiencing now. You did mention swarm intelligence, which is interesting. I did some work in swarm. That may be slightly orthogonal to a lot of this. It's kind of this idea of a collective behavior of decentralized, self-organized systems, I guess is sort of maybe how I'd formalize the term. But the work that's done in that space is typically kind of like a wisdom of the crowd, if you can think of it that way. And, people have predicted some pretty crazy things using just people's intuition at scale with that kind of swarm intelligence. So there's all kinds of work in that space, but I don't do a lot of that now, although I think maybe there's opportunities when we think about multiple LLMs as agents all communicating with one another, making decisions together, which is a very interesting way to look at how we can leverage this technology in the future. Anyway, that's kind of I guess it's the rundown. People.
That's a little bit different. Well, just to clarify that, I knew it had something to do with crowdsourcing information, and I wasn't sure if that was like, for example, taking a lot of anecdotal information and then distilling it down to having something a conclusion. Is that more along the lines of this AI side, or would that be an example of swarm intelligence, or is that something completely different?
I mean, honestly, it actually came out of the biological sciences, really, like literally swarms of insects, or in sort of recognizing that there's this, additional layer of information you can gather from a large crowd. And there was a startup out of Silicon Valley that we partnered with in my lab at one point to say, as you know, there's, probably closer to 20-30% inter-rater disagreement, right? When you talk about two radiologists try to agree, imagine, right, 3 or 4. And so a lot of the work that we did for ground truth, even something as simple as a chest x-ray, not everyone's going to agree. So we had to use majority vote and things to come up with ground truth. So we actually, at that time, explored having multiple experts not being able to influence one another. I don't know who the person is that's pushing a certain decision over another in this large crowd, this program that they put in front of us. And it kind of took away the typical things we do as people, right? We defer to the experts. Someone's the loudest person in the room. Maybe we're just going to go along with what they think it is. It was a way to abstract away the social construct of making decisions together and kind of boiling it down to what is my gut instinct. And you watch how the decision gets made with a group of people. It's very fascinating work. Safwan Halabi, who's a radiologist now at Northwestern, led that project. And I still feel like there's a lot of opportunity to think about that now. Imagine you spin up 50 ChatGPTs and they're all given slightly different instructions. You're an orthopedic surgeon, you're a general surgeon, whatever, and you have them discuss a patient chart, for example. This is that idea of multiple agents. And you can imagine this swarm technology may play a role there, right? It could be very interesting.
Yeah, that is. And then you mentioned generative AI there, which also, I don't know, I feel like from the layperson can get a little bit fuzzy, but I just saw a bunch of Twitter activity about OpenAI and some videos being created by AI. That's an example of generative AI, right? Where AI is just taking what it has and creating something entirely new. Is that correct?
Yeah, right. And there's some layers to this, but generally you're right. And I wouldn't obviously boil it down to imaging, because when I sort of casually say things like generative AI, I also am referring to large language models as kind of another bucket category. Generative AI becomes that. And, there's this encoder-decoder model architectures typically now a lot with, at least with the kinds of models that we're starting to get familiar with on the commercial space. These are typically decoder models, but they're generating text, or in some cases, right, you can see them generating images. And there's some nuance there, but you're exactly right. That's almost a new bucket category to kind of have to add to your alphabet soup there.
Yeah. All right. I think we covered a lot there just in that last 5 minutes.
We might need some slides, Aaron. We might need some slides and some
Yeah. But so, I mean, it brings me back to your presentation that you gave. I know you were giving talks probably all over the world on this topic. What has been the most common question you get asked by docs when you're out speaking?
Yeah, I have to say I really enjoy, again, I give talks to different audiences for sure. And I do enjoy the clinical audiences quite a bit. I feel like they're almost coming at this technology with very, very precise ideas of where they would see it having an impact in healthcare. And that's awesome, right? Because this is a general purpose technology, is probably one of the best examples of a powerful generational defining technology that is kind of multi-purpose. And it's incredibly accessible, right? I mean, everyone right now can have access to essentially some of the best technology on the planet via, a GPT-4 subscription, for example. And that's a pretty powerful thing that I've never seen anything like that in my career, certainly. And Yeah, I think when I talk to folks, maybe just casually or after a talk or something, I think they're looking for a way to get started. I think it does feel overwhelming. And I try to, in the talks, really emphasize that being overwhelmed is not unique just because you're like, we all feel that way. Like, I'm used to even during some of the deep learning days when things were really kicking off, I'd read 4 or 5 interesting papers, maybe a month, possibly if it got crazy around a conference, maybe 4 or 5 in a week. And here we are 4 or 5 a day, right, of really interesting breakthroughs. And so we all feel this way. We all feel a little bit overwhelmed. I think that's a fair way to say it. And a lot of the times I think folks have had so many maybe brushes with AI, especially in radiology, right, where it felt like it was abstracted away. There's always these engineers and there's always this very mathy kind of thing that felt like it kept you out of being able to jump in and get involved, right? Especially for those folks that are not technical. And now it's completely different, right? I mean, if you look at some of the most advanced applications of generative AI in commercial spaces, even behind the scenes, it's English language prompting. Certainly there's some engineering work in there. I've seen folks spin up decent use cases with, natural language interaction. That's something you might have seen if you're subscribed to the ChatGPT service. You can make your own GPT. I mean, who thought that you can just put that out there? And again, starting from zero, I can have a conversation with an agent that would build something for me. That is an incredible feeling. And so I actually feel like now there's never been a better time to jump in. And reading about it, I think is fine. I think certainly, podcasts and getting the word out, et cetera, is great. But ultimately, you just got to roll up your sleeves and try it out. And you spend 9, 10, 12 hours with this thing, it's going to completely change both your comfort level, but it's also going to change what you know is going to be possible as this technology continues to advance.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. We actually looked at that for BackTable because we have close to 1,000 hours of content. We were like, maybe there's a way we can create our own GPT that just sources information that's pulled from our content. And I think that goes for any content creation or media company out there. It is pretty incredible. And we're using it for things like show notes. And we'll get into how it can improve efficiency in clinical practice. But just as an aside, for us as a media company, it has significantly improved our productivity across the show in multiple ways, especially on the production side.
Aaron, we're hearing that everywhere. I spend most of my time in healthcare use cases and things, right? But of course, I interact with the broader Microsoft and seeing these co-pilots, as we kind of call them, come out into even everyday applications like Word and Excel and Outlook, right? I mean, and the reactions that you get are mind-blowing. Again, it's not something I've ever seen before. And the use cases are so diverse. You just mentioned marketing, probably not having to start with a blank page problem. All those things that just are a little bit of, I'd almost call them paper cuts that they add up to your cognitive burden. They drain your battery, right, over the course.
For sure.
And getting that out of the way, I don't know, it just really helps you do what you want to do.
Yeah. And Josh and I, the engineer, we were just talking about this before. Many in the audience are probably familiar with the movie Idiocracy. It's like, at what point will it be so, because Josh said that ChatGPT created a country song for him and he was, wrote the music for him and everything. So there's a creativity aspect to it as well. At what point are we going to get lazy? I mean, that's, I think, part of the concern, right? Is it learns and it becomes better than us even where we get lazy. Have you guys had those kinds of conversations at Microsoft?
Yeah, I mean, this is a concept of it's sort of skill atrophy, right? Like if I asked you to add and multiply a bunch of complex numbers together, you'd be like, oh, can I at least have a pen and paper, if not a calculator, right? I think that this as an enabler, if you're framing it that way, what would you do if you had that time back that you were spending? Doesn't require all of your energy, but just takes some away for these repetitive kinds of tasks. And as you know, it's not perfect, right? And I think that is something to keep in mind too. If you can up-level a skill or a capability with this technology, you can, reach more people with your marketing efforts. You can come up with different questions that are more targeted to your guest. These are the kinds of things I think that just make you better. And again, if you decide to say, well, I'm just going to have GPT write all the questions and I'm going to take the day off, that's also something you can do too, right? But I think most people that I'm seeing truly becoming super powered with this technology are finding that they can do more and different things and lower that, I look at as information asymmetry, the things that keep you from bridging into a new area. You feel slightly more comfortable with this capability right at your side.
Yeah, and you're totally right. It's just a matter of learning. And us as physicians who are busy, where do we start? And I think that honestly would be, I'm not surprised that is the most common question. You did mention earlier that Stanford has a Coursera course on it that's probably open access to the public. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So over the years, and again, I'd be clear to the audience, I mean, I have an English major, so I'm not some computer science wizard. And I think over the course of, 8 or 10 years of working on this full time, you learn this stuff, right? And you spend a lot of time. I took coding classes, did all that good stuff. But eventually I came to the conclusion that just like MRI physics that we teach our radiologists, if you know the principles and you know the concepts, you can actually be incredibly effective. So I don't know how to build an MRI machine, but I can tell you what that artifact is likely caused by, that kind of an analogy, right? And so we kind of captured that in a course. So I partnered up with someone named Serena Young, who's a phenomenal professor at Stanford. And we taught this course called Fundamentals of Machine Learning in Healthcare as part of a broader kind of AI in healthcare course. Anyone can access it on Coursera. I think we've had 20,000 people that have taken this now. And it really is just, you don't need to come with a Jupyter notebook, right? You don't need to have your Python ready to go. It's literally just getting you the concepts and principles so that you can be effective no matter what your background is. And there are some unique challenges that healthcare brings to the table. And we definitely cover a lot of that as well. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. That's a great, I mean, I'll probably ask you again at the end any more resources, but I just wanted to throw that in because I heard you say it. Just to get a little bit more granular here, at Western Angio, you did speak a fair amount to us about the labor impact of AI. And so I want to talk specifically about, are there particular sectors of healthcare or even specialties, and we know radiology is one of them, that are most ripe for disruption from AI?
Yeah, no, I think that this is a really important thing. The way I've seen it play out, and again, as you know, most of the time, there are many other verticals that are slightly lower risk, right, than healthcare. I think it's pretty fair to say. And so in those verticals, you can kind of get some, heads up or some arbitrage of, hey, where are things really working there? What solutions are they using to, maybe deal with hallucinations or accomplish X use case? But I think overall, I'm incredibly optimistic what this can do for people, industry, and society broadly. And I don't say that lightly because I think I was a notorious AI skeptic for a lot of reasons over the years. But here, I think when you take a step back and look at where the capabilities are today, and we all probably would agree that today, right now, as we're talking, the technology is the worst it's ever going to be. In other words, it's improving constantly, right? And even if we paused time, and this is all we had to work with is, GPT-4 being the best model out there, we can still do a lot, right? And that's how I becomes, so incredibly optimistic. And a lot of those things you're seeing already rolled out. There's things like the work that we're doing with ambient listening. So doc walks in a clinic visit, has a conversation with a patient. You can go on tangents. You can have a regular conversation with your patient, talk about their cousin's wedding in between talking about their stents, right? Whatever in that transcript with generative AI gets turned into a note. So by the time, you're sitting down and you're opening up your EHR, and a lot of folks use Epic, the note's sitting there. You edit, you sign it, you have to see it to believe it. It is an unbelievable use case. And so these are the kinds of things, right, where you have someone in the loop that understands how to take that and formalize and take responsibility for that information. And you're saving people time. Again, the cognitive burden is decreased. And you've seen some other things with Epic. So we have this large strategic partnership with Epic and Microsoft. You may have seen that. And that's where I want, as someone who uses Epic, right, in my practice, I want to see some of these capabilities brought into the software that I'm already using, right? There's things that the patient inbox is one of the first use cases. You've seen some of the stuff that Epic's doing with some of their data science work in Slicer Dicer. They have 60 things I think they've already announced on their roadmap. And if any of you go to HIMSS, which is coming up in a few weeks, one of the large informatics medical conferences, you're going to see a lot more. So it's not only enabling really powerful use cases that actually solve real problems, but it's also doing it quickly. I mean, right? Because we recognize that a lot of this technology comes from the ability to understand, reason, and maybe even generate information for your use case. So even if you're a coder or a data scientist, it's also accelerating those folks. And so again, you can kind of see this ecosystem. It's like this flywheel effect. People have great use cases. The technology can meet them where they are. The technology can also be developed quickly. And so if you layer that in a kind of a layer of responsible AI, you have an understanding of how to put the right guardrails on to make it fit for purpose. The sky's the limit right now.
Yeah, that cognitive burden is, I think, obviously we all know as physicians is one of the leading causes of burnout, just having to sit there and write that note. like you said, just being able to have a conversation, look your patient in the eye, and know that the notes being written in the background sounds absolutely incredible. And it's pulling out the essential information.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I will tell you, like, again, I know I did a lot of work in computer vision, but I also did a ton of work in NLP, natural language processing, in my career. And we built tons of these. In fact, we even built some stuff for radiology that was used for a long time before ChatGPT and Generative came out. And I will tell you that this is a really hard problem. It doesn't seem that hard on the surface, but just think about the last time you talked to your patient and all the things that came up. Maybe they're correcting themselves halfway through. Maybe you're correcting the dose, whatever those non sequiturs and just any average conversation. And then imagine looking at that in a transcript and saying, now, how on earth am I going to take that ball of conversation, knowing who's speaking, knowing how to make the note the way I need it to look in order for me to, right? That is hard. It's a hard problem. And if you asked me to do that with my old natural language processing tools, I would have told you it's going to take forever. But here you have this technology that, even though it wasn't developed initially for that purpose, and that's one of the things I talked about, right, at Western Angio, we're kind of having to shift our paradigm of how we look at AI and the use cases. It's not, I have to now deep sigh, here we go, I'm going to take 2 years to build X, and it's only going to be able to do X. All of a sudden, here we have this general purpose thing that is incredibly capable. Let's think of all the use cases now that we have this tool instead. It is a paradigm shift for all of us.
Yeah, on the imaging side, I think about lung nodules, incidental findings. Like, that to me is significant cognitive burden when you're putting a report together. I know that there's been a lot of talk about it, but anything that you've seen that has made significant progress in recent times where, similar to pulling out the essential information for an H&P, you can focus on the real problems and not all these incidental findings when you're reading your stacked cases as a diagnostic person.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you know, with PowerScribe being used by, if anyone's a radiologist, they're probably using it, right? And of course, I've used it for 15 years now. I would say without question. So, because of the Microsoft, this is really another place where this sort of the better together, as we like to call it, the two companies coming together, this very powerful horizontal company that has incredible technology meets a vertical, in this case, a nuance, or if we really want to focus down, PowerScribe, where you have this substrate and you have this use case as workforce that is so incredibly important, right, to the health system. And we have now opportunities even on the text-only side. So if we don't even talk about the imaging for a minute and just say, what are the things that we do we type with our voice, right? That's not super efficient and burns us out over the course of a day. We have to hunt and peck through prior reports, right? What do those guys follow? What did they say about X, that kind of stuff? And then there's just like hunting and pecking through the HR. There's just some things, right, that are still text-based that we can do to enable the diagnostic radiology ecosystem. But then you start to get into, you touched on this a little bit, but we do have more than 500 FDA-approved AI models out there right now, right? And they do all kinds of different things. And how do we bring those together, right? Let's say that you were really ambitious in your practice and you adopted, let's say, 20 different algorithms. So now you have 20 algorithms that are running on the pixels and outputting some kind of block of text, for example, right? That this is what this one found, this is what this one found. That's helpful, probably, but you also need to kind of now put that into a note that actually makes sense to somebody. So this is another place where you can see how generative AI could take that information in the right context, just like we were talking about with the transcript that DAX does, and actually make the note that I can quickly review, edit, and sign. So these are the kinds of use cases that, just from the text side, even when you want to combine it with some of those narrow use cases. And then in the future, as we look forward, you already can now put an image in GPT-4, let's say an image of your bike that's broken, and ask it, how do I fix this? And it's going to say, will you check this? Look under the seat. And you're like, okay, I did that. And you take another picture. It says, well, you need this size Allen wrench. So you go grab that. You can have a conversation with an image. And just like when I walked over to, the Gates building back in 2013 and saw that they were working on cats and dogs, and said, hey, think about that now in a healthcare setting, like having this almost democratized ability to interact with medical imaging in a way that we've never had before. Now, that's going to take a lot of work, right? You can't do that today. It's not like GPT-4, as many people have shown in the academic community today, even with the vision capabilities, has not seen enough medical imaging data to really do that, right? But you can imagine a place that we're heading towards where we can enable that. That's kind of the multimodal world. And what will that unlock? So I think we're really on the cusp of something pretty transformative. And It's going to take, again, a lot of us to work together to do this right. But I foresee a really big opportunity for everyone to get some of that mundane stuff out of our way.
Right. Yeah, we were talking about notes and reports. That data can be oftentimes a bit unstructured. Are we seeing companies that are just focusing on like those individual problems? Or is it more like one thing can be applied to multiple use cases?
Yeah, the thing that I get to see, I think, again, this is one of the fun parts of my job right now, is Azure is a platform. And the goal of it is really just to provide the best possible tools to build the thing you want quickly for your use case and have it. And with Nuance and some of these other partnerships like Epic, also bring it into the real world, right? I mean, if you built the most amazing report structure, whatever your use case is, right? How do you get it into the workflow? And that's kind of where we're really focused on enabling that ecosystem to do more. So we're not going to come up with every awesome use case. Aaron, you just might have one use case that only you care about. No one else in your group could care less. How can we enable an ecosystem where you specifically could execute on your use case and bring it into your workflow? That's the kind of vision. But on a broad scale, yes, there are lots and lots of companies. And as we like to say, this technology is collapsing timelines. So, again, you would have thought, I'm going to need to raise, $5 million seed round or, a Series A just to get enough engineers and capability to build X. Now you're starting to see people do that with a fraction of that money and with really good solutions. And this generative AI, again, both on the coding side and the development and building side, it's super powering everyone.
The other thing that I find cumbersome that I think would be amazing is you have your report, you have your, let's say they're a breast lesion, a thyroid lesion, a liver lesion, is something that can apply the criteria, the LIRADS, the BIRADS, the TIRADS right away, right? Instead of, again, you having to find your macro and figure out which nodule fits what. Are we seeing stuff like that happening as well, where it aligns the data that's out there, matches what your findings are with, for example, criteria?
It's an incredible use case. Yeah. And I mean, we have, in the quote unquote non-Gen AI days, so the narrow AI days, you can make rules-based systems that, and, Nuance has some of the things in PowerScribe even, right? Where guidelines would be sort of checked against an NLP model that runs on your report, for example, and can sort of select the correct guidelines. But now, let's say that guideline gets updated or the language for some reason changes or a pandemic happens, right? And there's now there's new language that we're using. It's so hard to update those things, right?
Totally.
And now imagine how much easier it would be to update something like that. So 100% to your point. And this is not just our issue, right? Across healthcare, right? There's new ways of doing things every day. There's new information at practically every specialty conference that may change our practice. How do we have a system that's flexible enough that can understand those changes or potentially reference the right use case? So that's something that, again, I'm also optimistic about it. I don't mean to be only optimistic, but it really is something that I see is much more doable than ever before.
Yeah, I think the key thing is getting docs away from being data entry clerks, which we've become, you know what I mean? And so if AI can empower us with that right there, I think that opens up probably 50% of our time, at least. I mean, I love doing cases. You probably love doing cases. That's why we chose to do IR. The worst part of my day is sitting down and writing a note or even dictating. I know my wife, who's a surgeon, feels the same way. Most surgeons I know feel the same way. They hate clinic, right?
Right. Like I told you, man, I've been building lots of technology for quite a while now. And I would say some of it worked, a lot of it didn't work, et cetera. And even when we could get it into clinic, it was still a whole thing, to put it lightly. And still look at, well, I know I can solve this. And you felt like there's this just long road ahead of you. You're like, do I need to run down that road in order to accomplish this one use case? And you just feel kind of, I don't know, defeated by where the limits of the technology was. And now here we are where I've literally seen a physician came to a group call. They tried out the DAX Copilot solution, and he couldn't wait to tell us that he was going to retire because he was just done. With the note, you could tell, like, he, to the point of tears, right? Which you never hear about technology, right? In healthcare, we're always like, I don't need another gizmo. And the guy's like, I'm literally changing my decision about retirement. And again, that's an endorsement. That's the kind of feedback. And maybe you only saved him an hour a day. But what's an hour worth to you? If it's taken up your evening time, if you're waking up early to get your notes done, you're getting harassed by your administrators because your notes aren't finished, right? That kind of, just imagine that going away and how much more you'd enjoy practicing.
I mean, that might be whether you make it to your kid's soccer game or not.
100%.
And that's life back, basically. So, okay, well, fantastic. Thank you for laying all that out. It's really how this can impact our day-to-day in our workflows. And you gave some great use cases. I also want to talk some of the concern that I've heard from docs when I kind of pool the audience about AI. Is AI being used against us by the insurance companies? This I've heard about is where they're using basically AI bots to deny claims based off of criteria on their side. Are you able to talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, here's the thing. Here's what I know. I've seen that, yes, there have been stories that, like you've described, I think that dates back well before even these technologies, right? I think that this has been a challenge for a while. And part of that is that when I look at now with this capability in everyone's hands, and we're empowering all the stakeholders in the healthcare ecosystem, they're creating tools that help make better decisions, improve efficiencies, and personalize patient care even, right? I think the perspective that I've been taking is that this technology will help us bridge the gaps across the ecosystem, not necessarily reinforce the gaps that we have. And I think that there's a win-win there. And again, if you take the perspective of the patient, they're already fed up with kind of how the system has been, right? And I think a lot of docs would also endorse that. And I feel like now we potentially have an opportunity to not necessarily reset, but to say, how can these tools really ultimately help with things like quality and things that we tend to talk about a lot, but maybe we aren't truly focused on? And will that also improve the bottom line of our healthcare systems as well? And I don't know, I really do feel like it's a bridging technology, and there is a lot of pressure to reduce costs. Yes, there's a lot of pressure to enhance the quality, but without the right resources, we've kind of been in this stalemate for a long time. And I'm hoping that this technology breaks us out of that.
Like you said, if the docs ourselves had more time to focus on what's important with the patient, maybe less mistakes would be made and billing coding would be more accurate and so forth. So it could definitely work. It's obviously going to work to our advantage if we can use it properly. And who knows what's rumor, what's not. I mean, in terms of how insurance, not that recently, but definitely over the last 5 years, have been made out to be this big, bad, evil business. And we hear a lot of it from our colleagues just not getting stuff approved. We hear from patients not getting coverage. And so I think that's where it would be amazing if there was some AI solution to help kind of advocate for the docs and patients who are constantly fighting against insurance. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, listen, as a patient coming from that perspective, if you can just fill out all those forms for me.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I need to give you the same information 90 times, like just some of those things. Not that I'm not setting my sights high, but these are the kinds of things that are still a problem for us. And again, where the technology is today, as I've said, this is the worst it's going to be. And there's already so much we can do to, again, it's paper cuts across the system. Everyone has them. And because this is such a democratizing technology, I think everyone can sort of feel empowered to say, this is a use case that I'm going to tackle, and I can actually tackle it.
Well, we're actually coming up on the hour. You had to condense your Western Age talk from an hour to 15 minutes, or 10 minutes, really. What other essential information have we left out that you wish you had more time to kind of elaborate on, given that, our physician audience, that might be helpful in their day-to-day?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, and this is a topic that, you could spend days talking about, really. It's not an exaggeration. There's so many ways to slice this. I think that from my perspective, if people take away that, like, there's no amount of reading or research that can substitute for just spending some time with these models, in particular GPT-4. I think taking that away and then leveraging that experience to sort of imagine what the next model may be able to do, or where the gaps are, where the limits are in your series of use cases. I think for me, that is possibly the most beneficial thing you could take away from anything I'm going to talk about. But part of it too is recognizing that everyone feels a little bit disoriented from the pace of acceleration of, the capabilities and things. And so that hopefully is a reassuring message as well. Like, it's not too late, right? It's not like this thing is going to just come and it's going to happen to you. I think it's going to be a thing where we get to decide together how these tools will be used in healthcare. I think for me, it's a much more of an empowering message than maybe any technology that's come before. I always felt we had to make a lot of decisions on behalf of the end user when we developed AI over the last, 8 or 9 years. And now with this approach, yes, there'll be some use cases that everyone struggles with and we can solve, but we can also provide tools and capabilities that make it incredibly easy to start doing these things on your own too, or with partners or other health systems, et cetera. So I think that ultimately will be the message of hopefully of empowerment and optimism as people are sort of seeing these things roll out in their lives.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's great. It's not all, some people, it depends on who you talk to, but some people have this sort of doomsday kind of outlook on it. But hearing your talk and speaking to you and another gentleman that we've had on the show, everybody's very optimistic about it in healthcare, it seems. When you say spend some time with the models, can you give an example of, like, obviously you recommended the ChatGPT 4, subscribing to that, but can you give a couple examples of like how somebody would play around with it for an afternoon?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that, and again, I don't mean to be overly dogmatic about GPT-4. There are obviously lots of other models out there. I will, again, I think I emphasized this in the talk too. Just if you aren't using GPT-4 for a particular use case and you find that it's not quite doing what you want it to do, it certainly could be user error. And so trial and error is a great way to start to learn. There's no instruction manual for this, guys. So it is a thing that you have to kind of figure out. But at the same time, if you feel that there's something lacking in what the model is able to do for you and you're not using GPT-4, I would highly recommend that you do it. And in fact, again, I still review papers for academia, right, and everything else. And if I see a paper that's talking about a large language model capability in healthcare and it's not using GPT-4, I automatically kind of dismiss the conclusions to some extent because they're not using the state of the art, right? So especially if it seems like it can accomplish something. But we're in this new era too, though, Aaron. It's not just about this giant model and then the next giant model too. Like you may have seen some of the things that we've been focusing on too, which are, I know this is going to be another term, but it's called small language models. Our CEO, Satya Nadella, recently talked about that. So this is really kind of a way to boil down some of the really powerful capabilities that these models have at scale, but in a smaller package. And it's a little more lightweight. And maybe you can't pass the law boards and write a poem, but it can maybe accomplish a series of things that you care about in your domain, right? This is, again, a very fast evolving field. But just to give you some examples of some things I've played around with for fun and for the audience, please do not put PHI in any of the commercially available models, and please work with your health systems to ensure that you have the right guidelines for how to use PHI when you're working with these. But yeah, so I would take, for example, no PHI, but pieces of a dictation, take an adrenal nodule, for example, that has, I describe it, right, whatever. And there, if you've seen those, there's these, it's literally a graphic, right, of a flow chart of like, if this, then that, in order to get down to the recommendation, right? And you can put the words that you describe the nodule and the graphic itself, not even just literally put the graphic in and say, how should I manage this? And it's incredible because, like I said, this is that multimodal capability of GPT-4, right? Where it's literally reading through the flowchart based on my dictation and telling me that this is what you should do. So those kinds of things are really fun. I also I hate to admit this publicly here, but I really do not like structured reports. I'm one of those grumpy radiologists that just likes to dictate the way I want to dictate, right? And so nonetheless, imagine now I've put in like free-form dictation and I've asked it to structure it, and I've given it an example of how I want it to be structured. So I don't even have to structure it. It's being structured for me. Those kinds of things are really cool. And then, I think just for fun, I tend to kind of push it just because I'm curious, like how much does it really know about my very, very tiny specialty? Like what is there, like 100 of us across the world at this point? And especially things in like vascular anomalies, really deep stuff like STS versus Doxy, all these. And I'll have a conversation with these models and just kind of push it. And I always walk away like, man, it feels like magic. I don't know why, but how does it know, right? Certainly it has points where it's not perfect, but I get this glimpse for just a few moments of what the future might look like. And that's why I walk away so pumped up.
Yeah, Matt, I feel you on the structured reports because part of it is everybody doesn't agree on what a structured report should look like. So all structured reports look different, right?
100%. No, yes. And then there's the thing like, does it go in this section or this section? And like,
yeah,
I don't want to use the pick list. I want to describe it the way yes, all those things. Yes.
Yeah. So I feel you. I like it. It's almost like you're telling your own little story of what you see in an unstructured report. But yeah, no, I mean, these are all great use cases. And Matt, thank you so much for spending the time explaining all this. Appreciate it. Any other resources other than we mentioned the Coursera course? I think that's a great place to start. And also, like you said, just playing with these models. Anything else that you would recommend docs can do to learn more or stay up to date, really?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, and I'll try to, because we're all busy, right? So it's not like you're going to be able to dedicate, weeks of time. So Andrew Ng has a site called deeplearning.ai, and he has a tremendous amount of stuff for technical folks. So if there's anyone in the audience that's incredibly technical, clearly there's plenty there for you. But he also has some courses that are kind of, he calls them for everyone. So I do like that. Andrew's just he's world famous, but just a phenomenal teacher. He just explains things in ways that you're like, oh, okay, I finally kind of get it, right? Which is always nice. But if you're more technical, I would recommend Jeremy Howard. Again, it's a light. He's phenomenal as well. He has, he started something called fast.ai, where a lot of my colleagues, kind of learned about deep learning in the first place and learned how to use his Python libraries to code up models really quickly. He's got some now content. This is all free, by the way, on YouTube. But yeah, if you look up Jeremy Howard, he's done a whole thing on, I think he calls it making generative AI uncool again. But it's a little deep. It's a little technical, but for those who are really interested in that. And then the last thing I'll say is, obviously, Microsoft folks are really trying to do our best to educate all the industries, right? And folks that are coming from a non-technical background. So we do have plenty of resources. And I've just finished a LinkedIn learning course, which may come out around the time of this podcast. Really meant to be a flyby. It's very short. There are 3 to 5 minute videos on just specific topics, everything from like drug discovery to bias to what's next, what's happening in the future, multimodal, all that good stuff. And I try to do my best to distill it down, and that should be out for those that subscribe and want to check that out.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you for letting us know about those. All right, Matt, thank you so much. We went past the hour, but lots of good stuff there. I appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, rate the podcast 5 stars, and share with a friend. If you have any questions or comments, direct message us at @_BackTable on Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn. BackTable is produced and hosted by myself, Aaron Fritz, and co-hosts
Chris Beck,
Sabine Don,
Michael Barraza,
and Ali Behetti.
Our audio team is led by Kieran Gannon, with support from
Josh McWhirter,
Aaron Bowles, Nick Shellcross,
Josh Spencer.
Design and digital marketing led by Brian Schmitz.
Social media and PR by Ann Dang,
Manisha Naganathanahali,
and Manveer Singh Sudley.
Administrative support provided by Jamila Kinnebrew.
Intro and extra music is Ripperoo by Skeptic Moon. Find us on Spotify or at local live music venues in New Orleans, Louisiana.
Thanks again for listening.